Kavontae Turpin, Chauncey Golston, and Israel Mukuamu are three names that you need to keep an eye on during training camp. All that and more in this episode of the Locked On Cowboys podcast.
You are Locked On Cowboys, your daily Dallas Cowboys podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome back to the Locked On Cowboys podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. We'd like to thank you for making us your first listen of the day. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Make every moment more. Right now, new customers can get $150 in bonus bets with any winning $5 bet. That's $150 for any winning $5 bet. Just visit FanDuel.com/lockedon to get started. I am your host, Marcus Mosher. You can follow me on Twitter at Marcus_Mosher. Joining me today, as always, is Landon McCool. You can check him out on Twitter at McCoolBCB. On today's show, we're going to do something a little bit different. We're going to talk about three players. We can call them sleepers. We can call them players you might have forgot about, but three names that we are watching and just going to be observing as we get into minicamp and then, of course, training camp at the end of July, early August. Let's start with Kavontae Turpin because I think Turpin's role on this team could look a little bit different this year. What are you expecting from Kavontae Turpin?
Well, he's just an interesting player, right? Because, I mean, obviously he has a very specific carved out role, right? He's a kick returner, he's a punt returner. He's been used kind of as a gadget player in the offense. But then, as you know, what we started to see last season was a little bit more of an inroads into being a wide receiver, you know, like an actual guy who's out running routes, an actual guy who's able to get down the field and catch passes at times. There wasn't a ton of it, and you know there wasn't a lot of opportunities that he got necessarily compared. He wasn't like the wide receiver 3 or anything like that. And frankly, wasn't even wide receiver 4. He was just a kind of a gadget guy that they were starting to use more in routes. And now that you've seen, we've seen Michael Gallup leave. We haven't really seen a receiver come in to replace that spot. You obviously assume Tolbert is going to be the guy kind of doing that, but I also wouldn't be surprised if Tolbert kind of shared that role with Kavontae Turpin. And then on top of that, you add in all the changes to the rules and the kickoff return and how much that's going to become much more of an important part of the game. And suddenly a player like Kavontae Turpin, who had a pretty decent role last year, now has an even kind of bigger role than he did previously, right? Because it feels like he might take another step in the offense because he's got a little bit more opportunity now that Gallup's gone, just less numbers and less people ahead of him. And then obviously with kickoff return to the change of the rules there, he's going to be a huge part of that. And then added in what he's already there for doing, right? Is the punt return stuff and everything like that. So I just think that he's a guy that we haven't discussed a ton just throughout the season because his role had seemed kind of locked in a lot of ways the last 2 seasons. But I think that it's actually probably a little bit on the move because of the kickoff rules and because I think he's just going to get more opportunities as a wide receiver next year.
Yeah, you mentioned in 2022, he had 27 routes run as a receiver. And honestly, most of those were just screen stuff, right?
Yep.
This year, I mean, it's still not a ton, but 101. That's a pretty significant jump. Now, I'm not expecting him to be running 400 routes or anything like that this year.
Yeah.
Could he run 150, 175? Like, I think that's a pretty reasonable expectation for somebody who is still probably learning how to play the wide receiver spot. Just really quickly, I don't want to spend too much time on him as a receiver, but here are the advanced numbers from Kavontae Turpin this year as a receiver. 34th percentile receiving grade, obviously not great, not terrible for a number 4, number 5 receiver. 98th percentile grade against single coverage. 94th percentile separation percentage. 21st percentile yards after the catch per reception, which is a little surprising. And this is probably the reason why he hasn't gotten more snaps as a receiver. Zeroth. Last. He had a 20% drop rate in 2023. That's got to clean up. There's just way too many drops. But I will say there were times last year where he made some big plays as a receiver. You obviously remember the touchdown that he had against the 49ers on just a gorgeous pass by Dak Prescott. He had the touchdown in the Commanders game on Thanksgiving. Like, I don't think he can be a top 3 receiver from you or for
no.
you, but could he eventually develop into that wide receiver 4 Dwayne Harris type of role? Maybe. I could see. I think we saw encouraging steps from him last year as a receiver.
Yeah, and look, the drop rate obviously isn't great, but I mean, I think a lot of that too is that, and not that this makes it too much better, but he didn't have a ton of targets. He didn't have like he ran 125 routes, but how do you have the targets, the number that he had there by chance?
Just overall targets compared to last year.
Yeah, or just how many targets he had total last?
I did. He had 20 targets last year. In 2022, he had 2.
So 20 targets, he must have dropped 5 of them, right? Is that what
Basically,
it was?
basically,
Yeah.
yeah.
So, I mean, I think you summed it up right. I don't think anyone's expecting him to take over the wide receiver 3 role. I don't think anyone's expecting him to, be a major focus in the offense. But I think that, what he can be is a more than just a 4th wide receiver that's coming in to take up snaps, right? A guy that you can actually scheme some stuff open for, a guy that you can actually try to get the ball in his hands. Again, just his value as an alternate guy besides Cooks to run clearing routes, right? And just all it takes is one deep pass like they had last year. And now you have to consider Turpin whenever he's on the field, and there's an opportunity for him to go deep. You have to play coverage to support that. So I think it's are we looking at the kind of scale up that we saw last year where he literally I think quadrupled his totals or something like that? No, absolutely not.
Unless you just get a bunch of injuries. I mean, but assuming everybody stays relatively healthy, no.
And even honestly, even if I think if you got a lot of injuries, I think that may happen in game. But honestly, they would probably go out and get another veteran wide receiver if Cooks got hurt or Tolbert got hurt, right? Because I think Turpin is pretty locked into his role. I think that what's changing and what's going to be altered is how much that role is taking up a portion of the offense, right? Like I think he may get more snaps, more opportunities to kind of play on offense and make plays than he did previously.
Let's talk about him as a returner. Do you think the new kickoff rules favor or hurt him?
That's a good question. And it really is, because I do kind of think that the kickoff rules seemed, especially just because it seems more physical. It's more about power than it is about speed, So I do wonder if you're going to see more running back types as the kickoff return folks, right? Because
the 200-pound guys, right?
Or at least guys that have the kind of instincts to wait for holes to develop and then getting through holes. Like I think it's just a different type of vision. You know what I'm saying? Because it's so much closer. It's closer to like running wide zone than it probably is, returning a kickoff was traditionally, right? And also just because the bodies are going to be bigger, you wonder if they aren't just going to see like guys that can break tackles a little bit.
Well, I'll give you a way that's going to help him, like without a doubt. He's just going to have more returns. Like, do you know how many returns Kavontae Turpin had last year? Just guess how many. He played all 17 games. How many returns do you think he had?
I mean, it was less than 1 a game, so I'm going to guess 10, maybe 15.
Yeah, 13. 13 returns. In 2022, he had like 29. I mean, you're going to probably get 35, 40 returns, maybe more than that, right?
And of those 13, I mean, there were 2 or 3 that I remember that he absolutely forced. I mean, I don't know if Bones told him to come out no matter what or whatever.
Oh, but but basically, go make a play.
Yeah, absolutely. There were definitely times when he shouldn't have returned it and he did. So, I mean, again, I think you're right in the sense that he probably will just get a ton more returns either way. But I also think that he's likely to share that backfield, right? We think probably there's going to be 2 guys back there. So it'll be interesting to see who's going to kind of share opposite of him. And do you how do you handle that? Do you have a primary returner that is going to, kind of
like a try to get, right?
Yeah.
Like
is it an up back?
It's
going to be interesting to see how they align all that, honestly. So that will be interesting. But I do think that no matter what we're going to see is a guy in Kavontae Turpin who, again, just hasn't been discussed a lot this offseason because there's just other stuff going on, is likely to get a kind of slightly, if only slightly, but still significantly slightly increased role in this offense and on special teams.
All right, let's talk about Chauncey Golston, who I'm not sure if he fits Mike Zimmer's defense. Let's talk about what his role might be in 2024 next. This episode is brought to you by FanDuel. It's winner take all time in the NBA and in the NHL. And FanDuel is giving you a shot to bring home a big win of your own. Right now, new customers get $150 in bonus bets with any winning $5 bet. That's $150 that you can use to go bet on spreads, money lines, player props, and more. We have a game 7 in the NBA semifinals, conference semifinals between the Nuggets and the T-Wolves. That's going to be a lot of fun on Sunday. We've got the PGA Championship going on, which has its own drama of its own right now. So go visit FanDuel.com/LockedOn and make every single playoff shot count with FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. Welcome back to the Locked On Cowboys podcast. Are you watching Fox Sports or ESPN on your TV all day? Are you having to turn down the volume because of all that shouting? Make the switch to Locked On Sports today, a free 24/7 sports streaming channel program for you every day to bring you the biggest stories without all that screaming. Locked On Sports today brings you can't miss analysis, opinions, and news streaming 24/7 on YouTube or on the free Amazon Fire TV channels app, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. All right, Lena, let's talk about Chauncey Golston, who's going into the final year of his rookie deal. The Cowboys have moved him around all over the place between edge, 4-eye, defensive tackle. What are you expecting from him in year 4?
Well, the thing is that this seems like it would be a really good fit for him, right? This defense. It just seems like, a bigger body defensive end that can also reduce down to play some, pass rushing defensive tackle. Like that seems to be not only what Golston does well, but what this defense is specifically looking for. They love their bigger base edge defenders to kind of help against the run. But I mean, at the same time, like this is what we've been saying about Chauncey Golston year in and year out, since he was drafted. And honestly, like we'll talk about Israel Mukuamu next, but short of Israel Mukuamu, I don't know that I've been more confused by usage of a player on the defense than kind of what's been going on with Golston. You and I were talking before the show a little bit, and it almost feels like, despite all those things that I just said, that if you look at the depth chart of the, what the Cowboys currently have on their roster, it's hard not to see Golston as the guy that's going to have to come in and be the primary backup to Odigizua, right? Because they just don't have a ton of other options for that position. But the problem there is that, I think when you look at Golston and his strengths and weaknesses at both base defensive end and at interior, 3-tech, he struggles to rush the passer outside and he struggles to play the run inside, so which is, pretty common for those kind of players. So I part of me thinks, he could be the primary 3-technique backup for Odigizua, but I think in order to do that, I feel like he probably needed to add a few pounds of muscle this offseason to kind of fully transition into a role in which, he's going to be playing the run. He would be playing the run a lot as Odigizua's backup. And if he's not Odigizua's backup, now he's like kind of battling Fahoku for this inside-outside role. And it's just, it's not all very clean in the depth chart right now, right there.
What's so interesting about Golston is, I mean, he played every game last year. Every single game, and he got double-digit snaps in every game last year. Yep. But if you take away week 1, which that game got to be a blowout so early, there was just 3 games all year where he had 20 or more snaps. Like he was really a part-time player. But what's hard to figure out about Golston is whenever he plays, he's really good. If you're watching with us on YouTube right now, you're seeing these stable numbers courtesy of Pro Football Focus. 93rd percentile pass rush grade, 94th percentile pass rush win rate, 83rd percentile no play action grade, 66th percentile run stop percentage, and then the key one here, and this is maybe why he's not getting on the field more, 36th percentile run defense grade. But if he's going to be just the primary backup to Osa Odigizua and you're giving him more snaps, I kind of like it. I worry that Mike Zimmer isn't going to trust him to be on early downs. And then when you get to pass rushing downs, is he going to be a pass rush specialist, or are they just going to kick in DeMarcus Lawrence? Or are they going to have Sam Williams play inside? Or will that be Marshawn Nealon? Like, I don't know. But, man, he's such a fascinating player.
Well, it's really fascinating, like just to kind of compare the defensive tackle, depth chart compared to last year, right? Like last year, you felt like you had maybe two guys who could play nose tackle, right? And like there was only two guys that could potentially physically play nose tackle, like with their dimensions, right, and their size. Yep. Now you look at the room and it's all nose tackles, right? They obviously got Justin Rogers. They got Denzel Jackson. We talked about Carl Davis was that they came in. Mozzie's coming back. So really, outside of Osa and Chauncey, Fahoku is really the only other guy that you could potentially see as a kind of defensive tackle, pass rusher, upfield type guy, and he's even again one of these guys that we're talking about as kind of potentially as an inside outside guy. So I wonder if, that they don't just sort of lean in with some of these guys as, hey, like you're a tackle now, and maybe they do the same thing with Fahoku. Who knows? We don't know.
I mean, I would like, yeah. I mean, those guys are never going to be 315-pound defensive tackles. Like they're just not. I mean, now Golston, I think his body, because he's just so long, could probably handle that weight better, but you're probably looking at what? 290-pound defensive tackle. Yeah, but if he's not having to play 35, 40 snaps a game, maybe it's okay.
Yeah. And maybe that's how you cobble it together, right? Is that you're not trying to have Chauncey Golston play a full load of backup defensive tackle run snaps. You're sharing that with Fahoku, right? And so that kind of keeps everyone fresh. I mean, that's the thinking I'm having. Or maybe you're planning on playing some more kind of mint fronts where you've got two true noses playing in the B gaps, right? And then, some kind of lurkers on the outside. So we'll see. I mean, obviously we've been hearing a lot about more and more traditional kind of three linebacker defense stuff. Yeah. So maybe they just plan on playing more big bodies in the middle on early downs. So if that's the case, that makes some sense, but it's still like, you feel like it's you still feel like you're missing a body in there somewhere, right?
Golston is such a fascinating player because when he was coming out of Iowa, one of his strengths was, hey, he's such a good run defender. You can plug him in right away. And then he'll develop as a pass rusher, not going to be a big sack guy. Now he gets into the NFL and he's like a pass rush specialist where you can't have him on the early downfield. I mean, would you be surprised to know that he, over the last 2 years, he's played 153 snaps on rundowns, or not on rundowns, 153 run defense snaps. That's it. I mean, most of his work has come as a pass rusher. Is it just because he's not quite big enough to be a defensive tackle, but not athletic and twitchy enough to be an edge? Or is it just a bad scheme fit with Dan Quinn?
Well, I think it's what it is that, we just talked about it, right? It's all based on where he's playing and who he's facing, right? So like on the outside, if he's playing the run, you can use his length, he can use his power against those guys, and he can hold them up. He can, sustain the edge. He can get off blocks and make tackles. On the inside, he's the way he wins inside is quickness, right? He wins quick. He gets inside quickly. He gets upfield. He's beating guards and tackles before they can get their hands on him. But once guards and centers get their hands on him, especially in the run game,
they can move him out of the way.
They're moving him. Yeah, because he's only 275, 280 at especially by the end of the season. So I think that's the issue, is that it's more about like the body types he's facing when he's facing the run, and then the severe difference between the 320-pound 6'3" guy that's not very quick, but he's strong and he's got a buddy, and the 6'6" longer guy that, that they can kind of tango a little bit and he can use his length. I think that's really what's dictating that more than anything else.
All right, let's talk about Izzy Mukuamu, who might be the NFL's best safety on a snap-by-snap basis, who might not even be active on game days this year for the Cowboys. We'll discuss that next. This episode is brought to you by eBay Motors. Passion, drive, and patience. It's the formula for winning championships, and it's also what keeps your ride or die alive. eBay Motors has everything you need to maintain your vehicle and level it up to peak performance. Superchargers, roof racks, exhaust kits, LED headlights, and more. Whether you're into speed, power, or style, eBay Motors has you covered. With over 122 million parts for your number one ride or die, you'll always find exactly what you're looking for. And with eBay Guaranteed Fit, your part is guaranteed to fit your ride every time or your money back. Because with eBay Motors, you're burning rubber and not cash. With all the parts you need at the prices you want, it's easy to make your car the MVP and bring home huge wins. Keep your ride or die alive at ebaymotors.com. Eligible items only. Exclusions apply. eBay Guaranteed Fit only available to U.S. customers. Welcome back to the Locked On Cowboys podcast. We are talking about 3 under-the-radar names as we get into mini camps and then obviously training camp in a couple months. Let's talk about Israel Mukuamu, who also is going into the final year of his deal. This one I can't figure out because whenever Izzy plays, whether it's in the preseason, the regular season, or a big playoff game against Tampa Bay, he's awesome. But why doesn't he play more?
I don't know. Like, I don't understand it. It really is one of the things about this team that has confused me the most the last few years. And look, I get it. Like, the Cowboys have been very deep at safety, right? Like, absolutely freakishly deep at safety. But even then, like, the Cowboys were using 3 safeties for a good portion of the year last year, and Izzy did not see the field nearly enough, considering the numbers that you're seeing if you're watching us on YouTube with the stable metrics that PFF provided. That's just absolutely ridiculous. Real quick, Marcus, go over these numbers real quick.
Yeah. So I had to use the stable metrics from the 2022 and 2023 seasons. Because if I just use the 2023 stable metrics, it's 99th percentile at everything. So this is a little bit bigger of a sample size. 91st percentile coverage grade, 99th percentile no pressure coverage grade, 97th percentile slot coverage grade, 99th percentile missed tackle percentage, which is actually number 1 in all of the NFL over the last 2 years. He has not missed a tackle on special teams or on defense. And then the run defense grade, that's the only big knock on him, which is 37th percentile, below average, but not atrocious either.
Yeah, this is all a long way of saying it doesn't make any sense to us. It's like you watch him on tape, he looks great. The metrics play that out as well. He's played extremely well for the last, honestly, it's been 3 seasons where in limited roles, you've seen him perform positively.
Yep.
And then you don't ever kind of give him a bigger role. And again, I understand it. Like, Marquise Bell was incredible last year, and then you end up moving him to linebacker. You obviously have 2 guys in Hooker and Wilson that you really, really like and you think that are clear starters of this team. You've got an up-and-comer in Wanye Thomas that you're excited to be getting on the field. Even Sheldon Redwine, like, it's just like guys that you like.
Well, and you had Jaron Kearse last year, in the last couple of years, who's played, basically 1,000 snaps every year.
That's right. But Kearse, honestly, like, Kearse actually makes it more of an insult, right? Because Kearse has basically been playing linebacker for the last 3 years. So if anything, you had more opportunities for Kearse for Mukuamu to come in and sub in for Kearse or sub in for any of the other guys. But every single time he did come in, and that's the other thing too, Marcus, that's really frustrating about it. Not even just playing safety. He came in and played, what was it, like 80 great snaps at nickel when you needed him. So it's just really frustrating to kind of feel like, you draft this guy, you develop him a little bit. You're excited about him. I understand he's a 6th rounder. It doesn't matter.
He's played well.
He's played well enough that
he had like 4 interceptions in the preseason, and I get it's the preseason, but like he does that. Week 1 last year, he has I think it was a defensive touchdown. He had a block punt in the Bears game a couple of years ago. Like, whenever he's played, he's been awesome. And do you want to guess how many defensive snaps, including the postseason, that he's had in his career?
I don't, because I'm going to be upset about it.
309. In 3 years, including postseason, and he's been healthy for almost every game. 309 snaps. Now, the good news for Mukuamu, and this is why his spot on the roster is pretty safe. He's played like 600 special team snaps just over the last 2 years. And I think the new kickoff rules are actually going to benefit somebody like this. That's really athletic and really long.
Mm-hmm.
I can see his not on the role on the team changing, but his value going up to the team.
Well, yeah, and I mean, you gotta think that he's going to get more snaps on defense this year. I mean, I don't know how much of a fit he is for what Zimmer wants to do or not. But I mean, considering the fact that he can play in a couple of different spots and he's done that very well, it's like you feel like you could find a role for this guy, right? Like,
so Hooker and Wilson are your starting safeties. If it were up to you, who would be the first safety off the bench? Is it Wanye Thomas? Is it Marquise Bell? Or is it Izzy Mukuamu?
I think at this point it's hard not to say Wanye Thomas, right? Like, I just feel like,
see, I would say Marquise Bell.
Yeah, I mean, again, going to our problem here, right? Like, but at the same time, like, you find roles for
a way to get them on the field.
Backs. You find a way to get him on the field. It's not like you don't have enough snaps for these guys. Find a way to get him on the field and get more opportunities. I just have this vision of this guy going to, I don't know, the Chiefs and being an all-pro safety. You know,
he's 24. He's 24 years old. That's
still young.
This is where I'm hoping, and Mike Zimmer has shown this before, being flexible and building his defense around the players that he has. I know he's not traditionally a 3-safety defensive coordinator or defensive mind, but you have so much talent in your secondary. Like, figure out a way to get all these guys on the field, because that's where your depth and your talent is. Get them all on the field, please.
Yeah, and don't just, I mean, what a waste this guy's draft pick would have been to know that he was so talented and just to have him on the bench this whole time. Find a way to utilize him this year. And if he's good, maybe you figure out a way to make him, you know, maybe you can feel like you can let Hooker or Wilson walk away in a couple of years and you have a guy that can step in and play right away.
All right, that is it for today's show. We want to thank you for making Locked On Cowboys your first listen every single day. Go check out the channel on YouTube. We are free and available on all platforms. Follow Landon on Twitter at McCoolBCB. I'm at Marcus_Mosher. Enjoy your weekend, and we will see you right back here on Monday.